What's a career actually worth? I mean, really. And what happens when you give it all up for love? Well, we're going to dive into a landmark legal case in India that started with exactly that choice. And this one decision, it forced the country's highest court to totally rethink what fairness even means. So that's really the big question we're looking at today, isn't it? If someone puts their entire professional life on hold, maybe at their partner's request, what's the financial damage if that marriage doesn't work out? It's a deeply personal dilemma, and it forces you to look past all the spreadsheets and numbers and just ask, what's actually fair? All right, so let's meet the two people right in the middle of this thing. First up, you've got Vinny Parmar. She was an air hostess for Cathay Pacific. I mean, think about that, a lucrative international career, and she gave it all up. Then you have her husband, Paramvir Parmar. He's a senior commander with Air India, making great money, has multiple properties. So you can imagine, after they split, their financial situations, they weren't just different, they were on different planets. And yeah, that huge, huge gap in their finances, that's exactly what pushed this case all the way up to the Supreme Court. And it brings us right to the core of what we're talking about today, a real battle over the numbers. Okay, so let's look at the hard data. And this isn't guesswork. We're talking official salary slips, tax documents, the whole 9 yards. Paramvir Parmar's annual income after taxes was over 83 lakh rupees. Let that sink in. This was a documented fact, not just a claim. So that's our baseline for what he was earning. Now, on the complete other end of the spectrum, you have Vinny's situation. After giving up that big career, she was pulling in maybe 3,000 rupees a month, and that was just from occasional jobs in interior decorating. I mean, the financial gap between them, it was just staggering. So you've got these two wildly different numbers. The lower courts looked at this and they awarded Vinny 20,000 rupees a month in alimony. And just to be clear, that's the financial support one spouse pays the other after a divorce. But when you put that 20,000 a month next to an income of over 83 lakhs a year, yeah, you can see pretty clearly why she felt she had to keep fighting. So as you can imagine, both sides walked into court telling two totally different stories. Vinny's side was arguing that his income was actually even higher, that they weren't even looking at his rental income and other investments, and, crucially, that the career she sacrificed had a real, tangible value. Meanwhile, Paramvir's side was saying, hey, hold on, her numbers are way off. They argued that he had new obligations, a second wife, a child, aging parents, all people who were now depending on him. And with two stories that were just polar opposites, the case ended up, you guessed it, in the Supreme Court. And all of a sudden, this wasn't just about the Parmars anymore. The court was now facing a much, much bigger question. In the eyes of the law, what does that little word just, what does it actually mean? Well, the key is buried right here, in Section 25 of the Hindu Marriage Act. This is a foundational piece of law for millions of people in India. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. The law doesn't give you a formula. It's not a calculator. It just lists some factors, income, property, conduct, and then basically says the final amount is whatever the court thinks is just. And that one little word, it gives the court incredible power, but also a ton of responsibility. So let's break that down a bit. What the law basically does is hand the courts a checklist. It says, okay, look at the respondent's finances, look at the applicant's finances, consider their conduct and any other special circumstances. Simple enough, right? But in this specific case, the Supreme Court zeroed in on something that had kind of been overlooked before. What was the wife's career and status before she got married? And that, right there, that turned out to be the absolute game changer. All right, so now we get to the real climax of this whole legal saga. This is where the Supreme Court takes all those factors we just talked about and applies them with some serious clarity to come up with a totally new and very, very different answer. And the way the court laid it all out was really methodical. Step one, they basically threw out the lower court's income assessment and said, nope, we're sticking with the documented 83 lakh salary. Step two, they officially acknowledged that Vinny was completely financially dependent and that she had in fact sacrificed a major career. Step three, and this is the big one, they ruled that her previous high-flying career should be used as a benchmark for the standard of living she deserved now. And finally, step four, they recognized he had a new family for sure, but they made it crystal clear that his choice to remarry doesn't just wipe away his responsibilities to his first wife. So, after all that careful thinking, what was the result? Well, the Supreme Court doubled the monthly alimony. They took it right up to 40,000 rupees. That's a 100% increase. And it sent a really powerful message. Vinny's sacrifice wasn't just an emotional one. It had a real, measurable financial value. But the court didn't stop there. They also offered a way for everyone to just end the fighting for good. A one-time lump sum payment of 40 lakh rupees. The idea was that this would settle everything, all future claims, and just let both of them finally move on with their lives. But look, the impact of this case is so much bigger than just these two people. The ruling didn't just change a number on a piece of paper. It created a brand new legal precedent that would literally change how alimony is calculated all across India forever. That right there, that's the Vinny Parmar legacy. And this is the absolute core idea that came out of that judgment. The Supreme Court basically said, listen, there's no fixed mechanical formula for this stuff. You can't just apply a simple percentage. Why? Because every single case is unique and it has to be judged on its own specific facts and circumstances. So what does this no fixed formula rule actually mean in practice? Well, it means that from now on, courts have to do a deep, holistic analysis every single time. It means they have to give real weight to the career a spouse gave up. It means they need to see documented proof, not just self-serving statements. And it cements the idea that starting a new family doesn't give you a free pass on the responsibilities from your first marriage. This was a really fundamental shift in thinking. This case also shines a light on a deeper truth about how the law actually works. There's this old saying that law is found, not made. And that's exactly what happened here. The court didn't just invent a new law out of thin air. What they did was take an existing law and figure out how to interpret its principles for the world we live in today. And that really leaves us with one last big question to think about. If the law is always being found inside of old principles, how in the world does it keep up with a society that's changing so fast? As our own ideas about careers, about partnership, about what sacrifice even means, as all of that keeps evolving, how does the law adapt to make sure that what we call just today is still considered just tomorrow and for all the generations to come?